Yay, here we are. Look at that. Hi, Yvonne.
Hello from very windy, chilly Melbourne.
Yes. We're gonna have another conversation.
Yes.
And I like our intergenerational conversations. I think they during this time they're relevant to have and for people to tune in with them. You have a beautiful New Earth community around you that has been forming, and you've been working towards that for decades. And here we are, both dreamers of the new earth, the change and the possibility. And
Yeah.
what do you feel to relate around today is articulated as relating to self. We were relating previously around our connection to our soul and what spiritually is relevant during these times. I'm open to just start wherever it feels good. And let's just
Well, you sent me a message last night saying what will we, discuss, and that's the first thing came up to me is we talk a lot about relating to the earth, relating to each other, relating to soul, but the foundation really of our well-being is related how we relate to ourselves, and that also depends on what part of ourselves we're then addressing. So, yeah, I thought that would be a good thing. And something triggered that in me at our breakfast on Monday when we had a new girl. Beautiful, beautiful person comes in. One of the things that I have been gifted with is that I'm able to see someone in their wholeness when I see them, not in their what they think they are. So
yeah.
this beautiful woman comes in, and so I asked her, "So what brought you here?" And she said, "I want to find a way to love myself."
Mm.
And I just felt this instant, tightening of my heart. I'm going, "Oh my gosh, that's so sad." But isn't that what nearly all the world faces? That this inability to love the self.
Mm. Yeah.
So I thought that would be a really good thing to explore between us too,
Mm.
because I come from, as you say, there is a generational difference, but at soul level, there's no difference to me. I don't see age. I laugh at people who look at me and go, "Why aren't you retired? Why are you still doing it? Why?" And I go, "What's my mission?"
Yeah.
Why are you not doing something? It's like so funny.
Mm.
Because I do believe in getting older. I think that's important. I definitely don't believe in the perception of aging. That just doesn't
Mm.
sit anywhere in myself. So this idea of self-love, I thought we'd explore that.
Great. Well, for me, it's definitely been something that has required me to willfully commit myself to. And I really learned that the only way that I was going to put myself back together was if I applied radical self-love and self-acceptance to all of me and all my unnatural patterns, my behaviors that were all performing a function with purpose. And so when I did that course in Syntropy, it kind of like everything fell into place for me. And what I was already practicing as a kind of mental override of my own programming. And I think this is what it comes down to for a lot of humans, is that we have all grown up in a socially conditioned environment, whether we see that there is a hand behind that at work that is part of social engineering. We can all say that we grew up in a culture of sorts that has had certain values and certain norms and certain things that you do talk about and not talk about, all the sacred cows. And there's been a lot of conditioning that has formed how many people relate to each other, but then primarily how they relate to themselves, which is kind of like, for me, turned out to be the last person on planet Earth that I actually had a relationship with.
Yeah.
And to recultivate that is a valuable journey, I would say, because what really is the return ultimately in my own experience is a sense of peacefulness, a sense of feeling at home, being at home within myself, being enough, being content. And it's not even anymore about measuring, but wow, what I had to do to get there. It is yeah, it's self-love that was required, but wow, letting go so much. And I've quite frankly come to a place where I couldn't even think up, because I'm not in that position neither, but I couldn't really think up how I could support someone to love themselves more other than saying, well, that's really relevant to be doing. And how
Wow.
do you navigate that with when others maybe ask you, how do I
Well,
love myself
yeah,
more?
and I thought we might talk about that. But, and the way to always, where I'm coming from today to look at that is what stops us from loving ourselves. Because when we're born, we are love. We are an expression of the God source, whatever you want to call that. That is the pure creative energy of love. It's not the little I love you thing. It is love in all its magnificence.
Mm,
And you see that in every little baby that's born. They have no doubt. There is no lack of love in that, in a newborn baby. And that is why we automatically love babies, because they radiate that out. So we can't, it doesn't matter. Everybody loves a newborn something, because it's instantly, you look at
yeah,
this is love presenting itself to you in its pure innocence, in its absolute magnificent essence. And we can't help but go, it is that wonderful magnetic feeling. So for me, it is what changes. And what changes, of course, is our conditioning and how we are then programmed to look at ourselves. Many years ago, when I went on this journey, I had this thing about when I leave this body and I get up to have a bit of a parley with the Creator, I was going to take him to tasks about our eyes being pointing outwards. And that is why we only relate to the outer when the inner is, needs to come first. But of course, that's our intuition, and it's always there. And
mm,
people don't seem to understand that word. I don't know about you, but we've got the same language base. And
yeah,
so when I had to learn English, I became very conscious of the connotations and what the words were actually presenting. And so,
mm,
um, when I look at a word now, I pull it to pieces and I go, what is it actually saying?
yeah,
Um, and so really, intuition, what does it actually say? What does the word mean? It means inner teacher.
yeah,
People say, oh, I don't use my inner intuition, thinking that it's something out there. No, it's the inner teacher that's telling you, what is right for you, what is the highest good for you. So,
mm,
so I think what happens when we are being programmed by society, by our parents, by who do everything from love, but they want you to fit in with society. So as you said, we get sculpted into that place. And I think the greatest thing that stands between us and self-love is the way that we're conditioned to interpret life. It's all through the eyes of good or bad, right or wrong, right?
mm,
Which is our polarity. And so we're constantly looking at, are we being good or are we being bad? Are we being right? Are we being wrong?
mm-hmm,
And
yeah,
so when you say, well, I've got to love myself, the first thing, the way that we look at that and the way that we go into attempting to achieve that is to go, well, what's right with me and what's wrong with me? So we look at our actions and our behavior. We don't look beyond that into our core essence of who we
mm,
are. And when we can get to the core essence as a true expression of creation, then
mm,
we are able to change our perception of who we are. And when we can do that, we can drop the judgment, and we can drop this measurement against things, as you mentioned that word of measurement. We're constantly measuring. You know, I have a questionnaire actually that I have for my beautiful students when they first come, and that is because it's the foundation of all pain. Is this kind of self-love, and constantly looking to be approved of, and you know, and look at all the exams we're set that we have to be pitted against each other, and the ones that pass are good, the ones that fail. Oh, don't get me started on school. But anyway.
You mean education?
Yeah, right. I love that word. Absolutely. I hated it because nobody ever was teaching me anything I wanted to know.
Mm.
I know I had to be self-educated. Search for things.
I think that's the process for most of us that are kind of, it's our inner nature and that innate knowing that we either deny for a very long time because of all the social conditioning, that at some point has to break through, and it's either the universe that uproots us. We have an accident, we have a fatal disease, we have a life-changing event will come in and swoop us off our trajectory, whatever we thought we were doing in the world that was all important, or whatever we were not doing that was just coping and hoping that tomorrow or the weekend will be something of joy.
Yeah.
Life has, and this has to, I lean this all back into syntropic agroforestry and the syntropic nature of life. We are spirited individuals, and we came here with a purpose. And of course, that purpose is something that we can ascribe to ourselves. But if you go off purpose, and if you go in against, if you live in a societal framework where your spirited nature is not being honored, it's not being tapped into, it's not getting triggered, and it's not getting activated in order to give expression as to what you as an individuated human being with unique gifts and talents came here to express, that's going to fester at some level, and it wants to break through. And it's almost like, you know, kind of that greenery that breaks through the concrete that ultimately can break it up and open in order to break through to the light. And this is definitely what has happened in my life. And I see that being the repetitive hero's journey in everybody's life, is that life just does that for us, because we didn't came here to be wage slaves. We didn't come here to do any of the things that are industrious, quote unquote, boring, not necessarily enhancing our connectivity to our spiritual nature, our communal sense of living, and really to the earth. And so those are those parts of, earth, each other, and then back to self. And how do we do that? Well, we kind of have to go through that rough process. But I really feel it doesn't have to be a intensely uprooting process in order to make the changes. Our Brave New Life community is something that I feel is very much is creating a soft entry point for people to even contemplate that such a thing is possible. I can create a brave new life. Yeah, everything is a choice.
Yeah,
I think that is so much that we have not been taught as children, that are the relevant aspects and natural comprehensions about our human sovereignty, about our human freedom, our free will, that it's not okay to trespass somebody else's freedom, because and we, in my experience, there was always that metric of the right and the wrong. This is what you do and what you don't, but it was never based on feelings. It was never based on a deeper kind of embodied understanding of what we are here to be together. I was never told about loving kindness when I was young as a metric to live by. No, you have to be kind, and you should do this and you should do that. And I see that much of the repair work and the restoration work starts Once people are sort of freed out from the conflicts of societal conditioning, but then the journey becomes to find oneself again. And this is what I see most people around in the Western world. When I lived in Australia for all the time, they're really just looking outside of themselves for themselves. And so they do benefit having anchor points like yourself when they're ready to be able to have that guidance in how to find that reconnection, how to re-enter in a relationship with self that allows transformation and liberation of all the bullshit to come about, because that's something that I think is really compressing a lot of people's abilities to even clearly think for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, well, this is what the world's facing, isn't it? Because I think we're the only species on the planet that actually needs to do this. I mean, you're so connected to fauna and flora as I am too, and I just go, can you imagine a tree standing there and going, like, I first have got to learn to love myself. I have to do all this work to learn to love myself. And I mean, I've got two beautiful Burmese cats, and they just lounge about, and they just expect me to love them. That's their sovereign right, right? And so, and they're not running around going, oh, I've got to do all this work to love myself. It's only humans that feel that they are separated from their creative source. And that's at the crux. That has made us incredibly vulnerable to those who have actually got, I know who I am, and I've got all these powers, and I can do what I like with these people. I mean, as I've said before, I came into the world, and heaven knows I only know why I did that to myself, but right at the beginning of Nazi occupation, and so. For me, it was, and the bottom line for them was to become the Ubermensch, right? And it's exactly what they're doing, right? So where you and I have had time, I've had a lot more time to peel all that off and find my core essence and find this incredible relationship with me, and that's all of me. That is the good, the bad, I am so kind and so tolerant with me these days. Of course. And I used to be, because I was brought up by a judge, jury, and executioner, a real stern Dutch father I had, right? People were terrified of him. And so I was, schooled into self-judgment. I did it really expertly. And that's the first thing that I needed to drop, because you cannot learn to love if you're constantly not good enough. And over all the years of working with people, that is the greatest disease that humanity has, never being good enough. And that is because they're always looking to be approved of by someone outside of themselves, be it God. It's still outside. And so when you realize that, right, our whole conditioning is about looking out to see if people like us or don't like us, if people approve of us, if we have the right qualifications, or if we have, the right, whatever, clothes, now it is the right, whatever they're putting in themselves. It's always looking to someone else to get approval and permission to move forward, which mostly keeps you being stuck or moving backwards. So that is a disease of the human species that has been hijacked or used by those who have seen it and gone, hey, that's very good, we can use that.
We can leverage that.
And we can actually, fan that one. But more and more of us now, and so I've had a long time to get to that place where I am source. in human form, and don't mess with me. Um, you know,
Right.
but because only I know what is for my highest good. And the I that I'm talking about is what I call the big I, is my inner teacher. And so you've had a slightly shorter time, but and as you say, you've done the work and have come to that place. And don't mess with you. But the people that are now going through all the suffering, they're not given that time anymore.
Mm.
And the reason is that for me, and I would love your impression of that, because for me, when I went on this journey, I was told that the planet itself is going through this process of evolution. And therefore, we little fleas, we're not even the size of a flea on the back of an elephant, um, we're either going to go with it and evolve with it, or we're going to fall off, and that's it.
Yeah.
There isn't a choice anymore. We've had plenty of time to wake up.
Yeah. It's in the past I carried quite a bit of grief and sadness for our human predicament. And then through the grace of Syntropy yet again, I was able to expand the timeline and see the successional progression of how did we get here. And that being able then to take not so much responsibility, but just really comprehend that how we got here is just performing a function with purpose to get us to, it's almost, and it's a bit sad in a way because we're going to have to forget who we are in order then to remember it and then be like, oh, wow, we're never going to do that again. But that is, for me, the outcome is that this is a great experiment here on Earth where it is love coming to know itself. Is that
I love that. Can you say that again?
That we are here on the earth as an expression of life for love ultimately to come to know itself.
You know, that's it. That's it in a nutshell, isn't it?
Well, but I realized that because what fills that hole of trauma when it's released and freed and reintegrated is the natural frequency returns, and what fills that gap kind of is love. It's not that we love the perpetrators, but we're free. We become resolved, we become restored, we become restored in our wholeness, and that wholeness is that original innocence, that beautiful original presence of love that starts then being able to fill that gap of trauma and that particular gap of trauma. And once we come into more and more acceptance, it is love that really is being restored from within. I see it a little bit as the holy church within, as a path to restore not only self-sovereignty, but a sense of belonging, being clear, being free. And when I explored all of this within me, and there's, everybody has their own journey in that, I discovered that that my journey is also the human journey, so then there's the human journey and then there's the planetary journey, and there are big cycles of time, and I don't not necessarily like this quote unquote spiritual bypass anything by saying, well, we're in the Kali Yuga, so because I call that outsourcing.
Yeah,
I get it, but I don't know what it means. I wasn't raised with that temperament of understanding, and so for us Westerner people to use that language, do we really even know? But it's not only outsourcing, but it's also abdicating. So basically we say, it's because of this we can explain it away, that we don't have to feel our feelings and process our own story and transform our own beingness, because we can just write it off that there's some, whether it's Jesus that is coming back, or whether it's Holy Mary that is going to, give us a sacred blessing, or any external agent, any archetype, any narrative outside of ourselves. If we lean on that, in my experience, it's a bit like using a crutch, and we become codependent with that. And then it turns out that, we actually are not living in the Kali Yuga. It's another 6,000 years, but we're now, and then I call it spiritual window shopping. So I've learned to stop looking outside and start looking inside. And it is, in the end, so simple. And at the same time, it's probably been the hardest thing that I've committed myself to, is to
Yeah.
undo dysfunctional and distorted belief systems that aren't based on truth and love in relationship to who we as a human family are and how we most optimally navigate with each other. And that's where that syntropic human ecology becomes something really valuable for me to explore and to sort of dance around and play with and really kind of, how would I say that? You are doing it in such a beautiful way, because it is in the simplicity of humans connecting, being around each other,
Mm.
being in communion around a common theme, and fostering a, a sense of community through that process. That is what's going to transform this wild and crazy ride that we're in. How's your experience in that? Because you have weekly meetups with the beautiful.
Well, so, well, yes, but before I answer that, let me say it's not just me, because look at what you're creating. You know, this community, that the Brave New Life community, is beautiful, and it is a, I always call it a soft place to fall, where you can be completely authentic and bare your soul and express your pain without feeling judged, where all of you is welcome. I always use that lovely term of Michael Singer's, the untethered soul. You know, I only go where all of me is welcome. And I think that is really what the community is about. You've created the Brave New Life, and I've been drawn to that because I have been working towards that all these years, to create a soft place to fall for all of my students, you know, and they continue to come back. I might not have seen them for 10 years, and now suddenly, can I come to Berkeley, or can I do another process with you, or whatever. And so as long as you create the space and hold that space, then, you know, the souls will find each other. I think that's all about the energetic alignment, right, that is occurring. And I so understand what you're saying. Anything outside of you, because that is what we've been doing. We've constantly put you know, the word responsibility, I've always broken that up in it. It's the ability to respond at will by choice. So I call it respondability. So that takes that, you know, because the word responsibility is heavy. And it's like, you know, the connotation, like, oh, no, I can't be responsible. And look, humans are very lazy. And at the core, they have not known how to be responsible, as knowing that as a power rather than as a burden. And so being able to go into that place of respondability, where you can respond rather than react, is something. But you know, when we're talking about this journey of self-love, and this self-acceptance, one of the things that I have really come across and that I've learned is that people, because we look at life through the eyes of judgment, of right and wrong, that's how we look at ourselves. So then we attempt to fix the things that weren't right, okay? And then you think you fixed it, and you go, no, I've dealt with that. I love that term. I've dealt with that. And whenever somebody says that to me, I say duck, because we don't deal with things and we never get over things. The only way that we can alchemize and integrate into pure love, which is what we are at our core, is to embrace every flaw, every crack, every misbehavior, every zig that we should have zagged, every, you know, and just see that as, I think it's an apprenticeship. So it's trial and error. And so you did something that you, in hindsight, you know, how wise are we? We need to embrace the worst things in our lives, because we learned the most from them. And until we can bring them into love and gratitude, and be really, really, truly, authentically grateful for the toughest parts of our lives and the perpetrators who were part of that, then we're free,
Yeah.
not before. And that is a very difficult thing to do for people who are so conditioned to look through this lens of there is only good and there is only bad and there's only right and wrong. I eliminated those words from my vocabulary a long time ago. It is whatever it is. And, I think I wrote something on the back of my book, which I ought to know off by heart, but okay. What you do in this life is irrelevant. It is who you are in relation to what you do that determines how well your soul progresses.
So beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's just so, for me, that is really the journey, isn't it?
Mm.
We're
Love
so
and
attached to
acceptance.
what we do.
Love and acceptance returns me to my freedom that was already mine. And one of the beautiful things that I've learned in this journey to become sovereign um, is
I,
that is that well, it's really my own freedom and my own self sovereignty and my own home frequency of love has really reclaimed all of me, because I
yeah,
was that right from the start, and it was more
mhm,
a returning to
yeah,
it in order to let go and process slowly but surely all of these parts and pieces, reintegrate that, and that in it all there is always a gift. And this is something that I've found language for only much later, because I kind of did everything back to front. So I released all my heavy duty traumas by just cathartic releasing it without even knowing that they were traumas at the time. And then later I learned that there is actually such a thing as disassociation and the relevancy to reintegrate these disassociated aspects of self. So I've had a really introspective look at the internal landscape of the human biological experience. And I've come to understand that this archetypal nature of human consciousness is really fascinating. It's all its story, and why story is so relevant to us as humans in the process of processing our own unresolved, to me is absolutely fascinating, because it's really what binds us, what matters in our own soul connection to other human beings. When we hear people share authentically, as we have in our Brave New Life community,
yeah,
Bob said it the other day so beautiful. It's like it's our meetings are like a ceremony, and healing is taking place all the time. Because
yeah,
when we hear each other share from how we navigated or what it is that we're navigating, and we are open to receiving, and we are tuning in with that story, and we're seeing the archetypes in our internal mind song arise as we listen, ourselves don't really know whether it's experiencing that directly or whether it's imagining, because the same neural networks are firing and wiring together.
yeah.
And in that way, I see that what it is that we are able to gift each other through these forms of relating is really quite potent. And as you say, it's a soft place to fall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what I noticed too, because now with the timing, because I have to sort of rush to get to my Monday is my happy day, because I spend at least an hour and a half with my community, and I tell you, the energy that we create is just out of this world. But then I rush home to tune into you guys. And I just think, this is the new earth already. This is already the new earth, because
Mhm.
originally you and I connected because we had this common understanding of creating new earth sanctuaries. And so, as I said before, my realization that we are now creating them without having to have the place as such or buildings. We are creating the community as we speak. And so I just look at it and I think, look at this. This is the future. We are creating this future. My daughter was no, I won't say what she was. But let's talk about beauty pageants. You know, when you see these girls and they're all getting, and then they asked, what will you do when you win? And then they all say, oh, I want to make a better world. And, you know, everybody's always saying, I want to make a better world. But you know what? You and me and all of us like us, we're doing it. We're no longer talking the talk, we're walking the walk. And that is, I guess that's a really big part of it too, is that the time for talking is over. This is walking. We are the way showers. We need to, you know, we need to create an environment where people want to be, so that they are no longer drawn into the alternative. You know, to me, yeah, for a long time I was the alternative, but now I see the other as the alternative. And so I just go, that alternative is not my mission. And I just have to keep creating more and more of this alternative, so that it's like bees being drawn to the right flowers for the right amount of nectar. And that's what you have created with the Brave New Life, which is wonderful, because it is, you know, it's international. And these people, you know what it is? People feel heard. There's a huge thing about that. But we wouldn't have as much trouble with relating to ourselves if we made enough room for another when they are expressing themselves, and we hear them without our own little story going on in the background, waiting for that person to stop so we can have our opinion, or we can have our this or that. Do you know, I love conversations. I used to like sitting in a cafe and listening to conversations around me, because you can hear somebody, they say, oh, have you heard? And you know, we're so programmed into drama. Oh, have you heard? And then they go, do, 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 do. And the other person is sitting like, waiting to say, oh, yes, but have you, I heard, right? Nobody's listening to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so you never feel heard. And I think when you're in the communities that we're creating, people feel heard. And once somebody feels heard, they show more of themselves. And by showing more of themselves to others, funnily enough, they learn to feel and see more of themselves that they might not have noticed before.
Yeah. And all of that is such a natural outcome. Like what I feel that we're restoring in our human ecology, in our own unique form, is just it's the return to what is natural, and how we as human beings are actually intrinsically wired to function and relate together. I discovered that, you know, my little gift is language. And so, you know, us sharing that foundational premise of knowing how to relate to English in a different way, because we have that Germanic root structure, totally opened my eyes, especially when it came to willing and wanting. And that was my doorway. When I unlocked that one for myself, and I felt into the energetic difference between willing and wanting. Because in Dutch we say, do you will that? To children. And even though it is not necessarily translating in my own childhood experience as something that came from my will, in the language syntax, it is still enshrined in there that third hasn't been changed over for something that is indicating that it has a dependency on another to actually bring that in. Because if you will something, that comes from within. And if you want something, it's more of a desire of what you would like to have come to you. And that can be unpacked further, but it allowed me to see so much more in the language that is stifling and inhibiting so much of our ability to even be in connection with ourselves. And so feeling-based relating is that three-part word that I kind of strap together, which allows me to then sense that I'm relating not just to somebody else's feelings, and in the practice of that, I'm receiving them, but I'm relating to my own feelings. And so there's a relating within that is feeling based. And to me, study of syntropy applied on human beings and our human family is that we are feeling based creatures. And
Yes.
if that is our foundational premise as a species, that we have feelings, then that is really what informs our navigation. And it turns out that it totally does. We have just landed into this misuse and the overuse of the intelligence that is just a way to kind of cope. But when we start creating those environments and those circumstances and conditions again for humans to ease in and come home to a place where they can speak freely and share, and there's no kind of teaching going on, in a sense, where people need to upgrade their way of expressing themselves. Everything is welcome. You're welcome as you are. Then what happens is that the upgrades happen naturally because you share, because I share, and the way that I relate to life is maybe more natural than somebody else relates to life. But because we're all coming in this life from this syntropic natural way of being, as soon as we hear somebody relating to life in a more succinct and a more coherent and a more resonant way, we will just drop whatever old belief system we had and we'll use that language quite automatically, because it brings us more in tune with what is actually real, what is living, and what is true for ourselves. And that's all based on whether people feel the resonance to that language or not. And that's what I find really, really fascinating with what we're doing, is that we have created an environment where we elevate each other by receiving and creating space to listen. It's yeah.
And also creating new language. You're talking about the will and want, and when you look at that, want is that word has been implanted in our psyche, because the more you use it, the more you're not going to get what you're asking for, because the word want comes from wanting, which is, in actual fact, it is missing. It's not there. It's an emptiness, an empty space. It is wanting, right? So by saying I want, you just keep an empty space to me. But when I create an energetic, so that's another thing, of course, that one of the things that I really started to build my work on was, because my father had this thing of mind over matter, I learned to use my mind, and finding, well, how do I use my mind to be able to feel better? And so, I needed to learn to create a whole lot of new neural pathways. This rewiring is a big job. And depending on how deeply conditioned you find yourself, right? So at my stage of life, there was a lot of years of conditioning to undo and to have new pathways. But now I've lost my train of thought, right? I think I've got off the train. But the language we are now use, the new language, that we are learning. So when I first went on this journey, there was no language for what I wanted to express, and we're finding ourselves in the same place. And the reason for that, I think, is because where we're going ultimately, language is not really necessary, because we do. When we stop making that noise, we can feel each other. I can feel people. They walk in the door and it's like a glass case to me. I know everything about them, because our energy is radiating all the time. And so when we stop making that noise and we just sit in stillness and welcome each other in that stillness, that is just magical, and this is where we're going. And language, it's such a beautiful thing when it's used in a way that creates beauty, but as you know, it can be equally used to create something different.
Yeah.
Something that I love about you and I love about Sasha is you sculpt your language so beautifully, um, and each word has a resonance that is uplifting and is of a high vibrational frequency. And that is, people are always saying to me, "You speak so carefully," and I go, "My oath, I do," because I know that every word I express is going somewhere, right? And it's going to come back and bite me in that rear end if I'm not careful. So yeah, so speaking with care is really important, and listening to yourself and listening to how the words that you utter, how do they feel in you before you give them to somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got a little bit of this understanding of self-relating, but it is really all about that, isn't it? It is that to be less occupied with how you are being seen and received by another, and more occupied by how does it feel within you.
Yeah.
And making that more important than the other person's judgment or opinion or whatever they offer you. And that's really what friendship is about. We look for people who we feel comfortable with because they accept us as we are. That's what friendship is about. But when we're out in the big world where we go, we need to go for work, then we have to, we have to get in line and we have to do all the things according to somebody else. And then all of a sudden it doesn't feel good. And how many people in the world are walking around doing something they don't want to do, but are too frightened to lose their job?
Yeah, well, that's all trauma-based in my own experience. People stay in their respective places and spaces of their own navigation because their ultimately fear is driving their psychology.
Yeah.
And when they are become, well, either life does it for them or they hear something cracks that casing, something opens that up. And that's when the real journey starts to begin. And I feel that the more that we can create avenues for people to dive deeper and to sink deeper and to explore more, it's a frightening journey to think about not having your job anymore. And I know what it feels like because I gave my business away, and because I've been a bit of a radical kind of re-enabler, so to speak. I just knew that it was part of me having to. And so I kind of quite fearlessly decided to do a clearing and do a resetting of my internal systems and my external systems, because our external world and our internal world are intimately tied. And it's something that comes for everyone in their life. And it's just, how can we cushion that in a way that it's not just a terrorizing, because it can be actually re-traumatizing to go through that process if we don't have either language or a roadmap to navigate that internal landscape of all of a sudden having to come and feel all these feelings that erupt because our worldview has been broken open. We realized that it wasn't true, or that there is a greater truth. And so we want to move into that, but that then also means leaving behind certain parts that are or would be keeping us from that greater expanse in what we may call a feeling of freedom. But it's really a feeling of contentment and fulfillment.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating subject to speak around for me as I reflect on my own journey, because it could have been so much nicer. But of course, I was bold enough that I wasn't going to have any teachers, because one of my first new belief systems was to think for myself.
Yeah.
I was a potent one. So I was with that, just removing every third party, every other out of I was not going to base my judgments, my navigation, my orientation, my feelings, my anything on anything that anybody else was saying, doing, being. And I've learned that premise of thinking for ourselves is really relevant, because I got myself out of codependency in quite a resilient manner over the years. And at the same time, it could have been a little bit more graceful. But I guess now I have my story to share, how I got to where I am. And one day I may actually delve into that a bit more. I think that may be very valuable for people to hear, is that human story.
I think everyone's human story is valuable. And, one of the things that I notice now at my stage of life is that in the Western world, we have lost this connection of storytelling from the elders, where, in tribal societies, the elders are revered and are listened to and seen as wisdom, as where in Western society, most elders are shut away as, if they don't seem to be coping, and not seen as a power of wisdom. And that is a big shame, I think. But our individual stories, everyone has a story to tell, because that is what this lifetime is about. It is about this, this journey of finding ourselves, and as you say, it's a journey of remembering who we are. And one thing that I do want to say also, I have to, and I don't really want to promote this, but I want to just say that it's got a key on it. So I always felt that I have a key, or I have a bunch of keys, and there is nothing that I can teach anyone that isn't in them. So for me, I just find just another little locked compartment, and I've got the key. I open that and then hold it up, and then you go, well, that's what's in you. That's what you haven't yet discovered. That's what you haven't yet discovered. And I think, this is where often teaching is something about that you partake your knowledge on another. But if that knowledge is not appropriate for that particular person, it is, it's not appropriate. So, for me, right in the beginning of this journey, when I went on this path and I was given this mission that I need to share my journey with people, I say so many words, and then I stop and I look at them, and I never say, what do you think? I always say, does this resonate with you? Right? So does this resonate with you? And in the beginning, people would say, well, what that means is that, does it feel comfortable? Does what I've just shared with you feel comfortable for you? If it's comfortable, then it's in alignment with you. If it doesn't, leave it alone. Don't judge it, just leave it alone. It's not yours. Yeah. Right? So that's something too that I've learned through this journey, that I go where things are in resonance with my vibrational frequency key, my signature key. And we all have a tone, and we all have a resonance that we vibrate to. And when we find another who vibrates in a similar fashion, then there is music, And I always laugh when people say, oh, I hate that music. No, you don't hate that music. That music doesn't resonate in a way that is good for you. So, find music that nurtures you, and leave music that doesn't nurture you to somebody else. But don't judge it. And that's the same with people.
That's right. The cells know.
The cells, absolutely. That's just such a lovely thing to say, because, kinesiology is now becoming quite a big business, right? Or a big find, so to speak. But I've always said below the ears is the only place that truth lies.
Yeah, because
that's just a mess, right? So we were so programmed to go up here. But if you listen to this below the ears, it is wonderful. It is, every cell of your body will tell you whether this is the right path or not the right path. But we're so busy intellectualizing everything or analyzing everything, we've missed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
That's where that
So,
intuition then can be
yeah,
accessed again. Yeah.
yeah. And so that self-relating that, that we're really discussing today is about that. How intrinsically connected are you to all of the cells of your body, to your organs, to your, I've been bushwalking for many, many years. And at the end of a walk, I sit there and I love my feet. And I think these little things, they have just walked 16 kilometers or 7 or whatever. And they just carry me. And look, there's all of this, and there's only that much of a platform that's carrying. I find that magical. So then, I thank my feet, I thank my legs, I thank my body, I thank my stamina, when everybody else thinks I ought to be walking around with a walking stick. It's that understanding that, this is what allows me to be speaking with you. This is what allows me to be surrounded by plants and to breathe this air and to hug my grandchildren. So what's not to love?
Mm, mm.
And it doesn't matter what you do or don't do. Without this, you have no life.
Yeah.
And when we can really come home to that understanding, we will start to look after it better, and we will stop allowing other people to decide what is good for us or not.
That's right. Love yourselves.
And
It's
that's what sovereignty is about.
yeah. 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 I get emails sometimes from people that want to become sovereign, and I share with them that the only way to true sovereignty is radical self-love. And they sometimes leave a little bit bewildered, and sometimes they're very intrigued, and they go into the journey and into what I share around syntropy and self-love and self-sovereignty, and this little triune that is about remembering human nature, and that human nature is that we are sovereign. But the only way to get there is by being fully committed to being self-loving, because that love and acceptance brings us back into that place where we can return to our innate freedom, our original place of love. It is great to be having these conversations with you, Yvonne. It's just such a joy.
Beautiful, I mean, what I just love is that you're in the place, my second home, which I just adore, and I can't wait to get back to Bali. But because that's where I do quite a bit of spiritual work. But and of course we have a similar base. But what you just said is, people ask you how to become sovereign, and the answer is really simple. You are. We are all sovereign. We just need to remember it. It's not about becoming sovereign, it's remembering it. It's that journey of remembering that we're all on. And it's a very interesting journey. And it's not for the faint-hearted.
That is, no, it takes courage, which is enheartment. Yes, definitely.
Oh, is it? I left Holland when I was 14, so I've got a sort of, that kind of language, and language changes over the years. So, and I don't have anyone to speak that language with. So it's quite funny when we have the odd little word. So when I was in the operating room here, I was in charge of theatres in Melbourne. I worked with Sir Edward Dunlop, and I adored him. He was just a very special person in my life. And so, but of course, because he was a prisoner of war in Indonesia, he had learned to speak Dutch. And so when he was operating, and if I was, his scrub nurse, which I was often, he would speak to me in Dutch under his breath, and he would be telling me all these little things about his resident. And then when a nurse went past, he'd say, "Klein, lekker kind," and I'd be cracking up, which really means nice girl. And so it's lovely when you can have those little asides. Because your language has different meanings and different connotations in different situations, which is beautiful. So
We are at an hour here already. I could just sit here and talk with you for much longer. I think we're going
I'm
to do
just
this
looking
again
forward
next
to
week.
the day I come to Bali and put my arms around you because I'm a big hugger. And I just go, wow, and we can sit and parlay. That will be just so gorgeous.
So beautiful.
Mm.
Nice. Until then, we will use this lovely means of relating and connecting. It's just so great, and that we can then share that with others in the process. What a gift! And
Yeah, what a gift, you know. I mean, my daughter lives in Kuala Lumpur and with my two grandchildren and her lovely husband. And they've been in lockdown for quite some time. And so I haven't seen them for a long time. But then I say to them, you know, look, we can video phone. I can see you every day if I want to. We have, you know, all this technology. So we just use what we can and we stay as close as we can. And we create a new earth.
that's it's a place that gets birthed from within.
Absolutely.
I'm just putting in if people are listening in and sharing this out at some point. That always happens in our community. A place to connect with you on Facebook, where this is also streaming.
Yeah, I'll have to somehow get my mind around creating another website. I'm just haven't got the motivation. So when I'm not motivated, I don't really do much. I just follow spirit every day.
Yes, I call that follow the cells. They know. So
Yeah.
when
So
they
much
don't feel like it,
change.
I'm not engaging. Yeah.
There's so
Yeah.
much changing at the moment that whatever I want to present on that website, you know, all the old is gone, and so it's not quite there yet. So I'm just leaving it as it is.
Beautiful.
Not
Lovely.
necessarily.
Well, have a
thank
beautiful
you.
day, night, wherever you are on the earth, everyone. We shall reconvene another conversation with Yvonne
And,
and Souvereign at another time.
and
Yay.
I'll see you again on Monday.
Yay. Ciao for
Like
now.
you, I don't get up on Thursday night late to talk. Monday.
That's great. Beautiful.
Thank
Ciao.
you. Ciao. Bye.